So is Donald Trump just an idiot? That's what I'm exploring today on the Lenses That Liberate podcast. So welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm exploring Donald Trump, and in particular, the attitude that liberals feel towards him. Just to be clear from the beginning, although I'd say I identify as an independent in the sense that I don't really resonate with either party in America, I would say it's true that for as long as I can remember, I've primarily identified with liberal values. And I just want to be clear that my intention for recording this is that it increases understanding and that it reduces the division in the country between people. That's my only interest in recording this. So often I see in liberal circles and liberal media so much Trump bashing that Trump is just this absolute idiot and there's nothing redeemable or good about him whatsoever, or nothing intelligent about him. And that seems to me to be a very black and white way of thinking that actually furthers the division in the country. Right now, as of this morning, Donald Trump has a 47% approval rating of his job as president in America, and that's almost half of the country. So when liberals demonstrate a real lack of understanding, in my opinion, of Donald Trump and the full spectrum of who he is, they're essentially adding to that division of that 47% of people who actually support him right now. So for only to evaluate Donald Trump on his cognitive capacity, on his ability to communicate ideas, clearly there's so many examples to point to where he's not acting very intelligent. He's definitely, and I think most liberals and Republicans would agree, that he's not this stable genius that he presents to himself and other people. That's clearly the case. Psychologists such as Howard Gardner and many other people have studied different forms of intelligence though. And many of these different models, in Howard's model, there's 9 different forms of intelligence. Ken Wilber in his integral theory goes through many different lines of development, he calls it as well. And these are different lines of development or intelligences that people can develop in their lives. So obviously cognitive intelligence is one of them, but there are many others, such as ethical, aesthetic, spiritual, kinesthetic, musical, etc. So when it comes to Donald Trump, definitely his cognitive capacities are not very strong. In fact, if you go back and watch videos of him in the 1990s, he's much more coherent and clear in his points. And I went back recently and watched some videos of him, and I was very surprised to see how sharp he actually was in his ability to communicate ideas. So I have little doubt that there's been some mental deterioration in him in the last few years. I've heard psychologists and psychiatrists openly claim everything from Donald Trump is suffering from severe narcissistic personality disorder to serious declines in his cognitive capacities. And I think that's all fair game to explore. But if we're only limiting intelligence to cognitive capacity here, we're only dealing with part of the picture. Another very simple way of looking at this is looking at the 3 different forms of intelligence as head, heart, and gut. So from a head perspective, Donald Trump is not up there with the best of them. From a heart perspective, definitely his caring and compassion for a wide variety of groups is not up there with the best of them. But from a gut perspective, from an instinctual capacity, I think his ability to act from that place is better than almost anybody out there. Now, he may be using those instincts for very egocentric and narcissistic gains, but that does not diminish the fact that his instinctual capacity for reading situations is very, very high. In fact, in my opinion, compared to other politicians out there such as Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, I would say he's many, many times stronger than those people. His ability to read people, his ability to read a crowd, to follow his instincts and act upon them in different ways is very strong. And that has served him greatly. And it's also something that his base and supporters respects about him deeply. That he doesn't always go to his intellectual capacity, which is, we've already talked about, is not very strong in many ways. But if we don't acknowledge this, if we don't acknowledge that Donald Trump is not just this idiot, that he also has many strengths, we're not having a full conversation about this, and we're actually adding ourselves to this divisiveness. Because if we don't acknowledge what's actually good about Donald Trump, now, as I said, he may be using those instincts for very egocentric reasons, but if we don't acknowledge the qualities in him that have brought him to where he is, we just further alienate ourselves from the people that actually support him. And I see so much of that happening in America these days. Liberals almost never, ever acknowledge anything good about Donald Trump's presidency. I've heard some people, for example, speak about some of his policies towards China as being quite positive. People like Andrew Yang, Marianne Williamson, I've heard directly have spoken in favor of some of the policies taken in the last few months, but they're few and far between, the people who actually admit he's done any good. And as I said, that just alienates people. If somebody on the fence is turning on the news and all they see is a completely biased view against Donald Trump, then it's reaffirming Donald Trump's position that all the media is fake news and it's a witch hunt and they're out to get him. Right now in America, the media has a 41% approval rating. As I've said, Donald Trump has a 47% as of today. It's usually somewhere between 43 and 47% in most of the polls, his approval rating. So Donald Trump is actually a higher approval rating than the media. And this is one of the main reasons, because it's become so polarized, because people are not willing to speak in any terms other than black and white about who he is. And this has got so little to do with him as a person and so much more to do with what he actually represents and the people he represents. If we as liberals are actually interested in bringing together people, in healing this divide in America, we have to be aware of this. If you turn on any late night show every night in America, there's a constant mockery of Donald Trump. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of it's very funny. I watch clips of it every day and I laugh at it. But at the same time, if that's the only thing people are doing to deal with how they feel about Donald Trump, just blindly laughing at him and thinking he's an idiot, that sense of moral superiority that people get is one of the things that adds to the division. Now, if you say to anybody directly, do you want to add to the division in America? They will say no. But we have to take responsibility for ourselves and notice that we as liberals are massively adding to the division when we see Donald Trump in black and white terms. There's nothing wrong with off-gassing some of that tension we feel about what's happening through humor and satire. That's fantastic. But as I said, there has to be more to the conversation than that. The more we can move from just blaming and laughing and projecting the core of our own narcissism actually onto Donald Trump continuously and blaming him as if he's the only person in the world that's narcissistic fundamentally is such a shallow way of dealing with it. What I've noticed is the people who are able to own their own narcissism, and in my experience, every one of us has narcissistic tendencies at the core of ourselves. The more we can own our own tendencies and do our own inner work like that, the less we're triggered by somebody like Donald Trump. Now, that doesn't mean we won't move in constructive ways to create the country we want. That doesn't mean we're going to vote for him or even like him. But if we're deeply triggered by Donald Trump's narcissism, that's something we have to look at and address fundamentally in ourselves first if we want to be part of the solution and not just adding to the divisiveness. It's so easy to mock Donald Trump. There's so much to laugh at. But when are we going to get over that? When are we going to move on to a more constructive way of relating to what's happening? Like, we all get it. I completely agree with those positions that Donald Trump lacks a tremendous amount of self-awareness and his cognitive capacity is not up to par with anybody we'd like in charge of this country or any other country. But is it possible for us to move beyond that into a curiosity? Why is it that people support Donald Trump? Is he just an idiot? Is it really possible that somebody can rise through the ranks and become president like that who's just an idiot? I don't think so. I think that's absolutely ridiculous and very small-minded. Donald Trump has been planning to run for president since 1988 at least. There's a video of him online in 1988 at the Republican National Convention with Roger Stone when he's speaking about the possibility of running for president soon. So this was not something he concocted recently to boost his NBC Apprentice ratings or anything like that. He had been thinking about this and planning this for a long, long time. And if you think that he's only an idiot in that, you're mistaken. You haven't looked at this clearly. You haven't turned your curious attention to this and paid more attention. So in my opinion, the fundamental way we start to overcome the division in the country is through understanding. It's through asking more questions. It's questioning our own beliefs and being willing to sit with our own discomfort for a little longer rather than projecting it outward so quickly. So in summary, Donald Trump absolutely lacks many cognitive functions that we'd really like in a leader. There's no doubt about that. And it's both humorous and shocking at the same time to see him out there as the voice for all Americans internationally. No doubt about that. But if we just stay in laughing about that, does that really help matters? There's reasons people support Donald Trump. He is not an idiot in the way people think he is. And every minute we spend reinforcing that is another minute we're reinforcing the division in this country.